After years of preparation, he was about to conquer the impossible. But how was he able to get this good? It's a story of hope, hardship, failure, and ultimately becoming the best. This is the story of Roblox's greatest player, Boomsasok. But before we start the video, please consider subscribing to the channel, as we are trying to hit 20,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I know it's just the click of a button, but it goes a long way. Thanks! Welcome to 2018, where an 11-year-old decides to make his account, Boomsasok. Okay, we don't need to go that far back, let's fast forward a bit to 2020. Here, Boom starts to develop a certain affinity for obbies, mainly just easy stuff you see on the front page. But then, he sees something that captures his attention, the impossible obby. 30 stages ranging from easy to nearly impossible, and Boom wanted to beat it. Although he couldn't quite conquer it, the impossible obby was his first glimpse at truly difficult obbies, and little did he know that in the upcoming months, he would become one of the best. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, as currently, Boom is just on YouTube when MathFactor360. He was playing a game known as Eternal Towers of Hell, called Jupiter's Towers of Heck at the time. Seeing this interesting obbying game, he decides to try it out, and is surprisingly good. He went from an easy tower, Tower of Anger, all the way to a remorseless, Tower of True Skill, which is about 128 times harder than the former in just a week. It was extraordinary for the time, and Boom had just the idea to keep progressing quickly. Instead of just going for slightly harder obbies, he would play the hardest at the time, which are at the catastrophic difficulty, 4 levels above remorseless and the hardest on a modern difficulty chart. At the time, he got some decent runs of the game's hardest tower, Tower of Elongated Runs, before attempting to beat something harder than remorseless. This would be the Tower of Difficulty Chart Classic, sitting at the insane level, 4 times harder than True Skill. But this is where he hit a wall. Due to the tower's use of wall hops on its last floor, he really struggled with it, grinding it for over a week until one final lucky run where he beat it. It seemed as if it was only downhill from here, but that completion made something click. He began to absolutely demolish every obby he faced, 2 insanes in a matter of 5 days, his first extreme 2 days, and 2 terrifyings just 1. This pace was unprecedented, as any normal player would take months of grinding just to get to this level, but Boom, he did all of this in just over 3 weeks if we don't account for breaks. Already, players knew he had a reputation as an amazing obbyist, but he wanted better. He wanted to beat one of those towers he would grind as a remorseless player. This was the Tower of Generation failure. It would be a grueling grind, possibly taking up to a wait, what? He beat it in just a week? Yeah, Boom was dedicated and also blessed with some of the best skill on Roblox, leading to him being considered one of the greatest by the community. But one of wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed to be the undisputed best on Roblox. To begin this journey, he started simple, uploading his first video to the Boomsasok channel. It was simply just a completion of TOI, a simple 3-day grind for him. The true showcase of his skill would come with the Tower of Elongated Runs, sitting at the high end of catastrophic difficulty, and was the hardest obby beaten on Roblox at the time. But that didn't mean anything to him. He blazed through it, quickly arriving at the final stretch, but then he failed 2 jumps away from victory. For most, this would be a devastating setback. For Boom though, this was just a little mishap, and he ended up being one of its first victors with a new longest grind of just 9 days. This is the fastest progression in skill to date, making him a bit of an icon in the community. But to truly prove that he was better than the rest, he decided instead of beating another catastrophic, he would verify one. For this goal, Boom set his sights on the Tower of Champions Road, a high catastrophic based on pure raw skill. On February 13th, 2021, he managed to make it to the tower's net on the 5th floor, meaning as long as he didn't quit, it was a guaranteed win. But the net here is brutal, allowing you to still fall over 4 floors in the worst cases, and has even harder gameplay than the first half. Because of this demotivating combination, he quit while he was ahead after reaching floor 8. It was slow but steady progress, and Boom was slowly gaining the consistency to verify it. But then, he uploaded a devastating fail, just 3 jumps from the win pad. At people's first sight of it, they thought he was going to be set back. But no, this was just an hour before he would upload his full completion, meaning he had verified a new top 1 at the time, completing his goal. But as you may guess, he didn't view that as the end. Boom was waiting for something much harder than anything he attempted before, and while he waited for that, he tried his hand at tiered obbies. These are obbies that are very short but have much harder raw gameplay than usual, with each tier being twice as hard as the last. Unsurprisingly, he went on to do a tier 15, equivalent to a terrifying, and 2 tier 16s, equivalent to catastrophic, extremely quickly, boosting his raw skill to points even himself couldn't believe. But just as he was getting bored of obbies, something would appear. Something so difficult that it went beyond the standard difficulty chart. This obby was none other than the Tower of Vacant Hindrances. Similar to a tiered obby, it was short, but it also had some of the hardest jumps on Roblox. Boom quickly snagged the world record on it, making it to the 7th floor, which was actually the 8th because 10 was fully netted. But then, just as his consistency was picking up, Roblox changed its physics. Not drastically, just slightly, and because of how intricate the jumps were, one on floor 2 became nearly impossible. For over 2 weeks, he struggled on the jump, until his motivation was gone. It would take just about 3 weeks for the creator to nerf the jump, and also to regain his motivation, but when he did, his true skill showed. Immediately, he made it all the way to floor 9 with a devastating fail. Keep in mind that this was like failing floor 10, so it wasn't good at all. But just 2 days later, the lucky run would happen. The barrier was broken. Roblox's first horrific obby had been beaten, cementing Boom's name as the best obbyist to touch the platform. But this was step 1. You see, just like every time before, he knew this wasn't the limit to his skill, and he wanted to push the limits of obbying further. So, he attempted to complete an obby nearly double as hard as TOBH. This obby turned out to be the infamous Tower of the Roof's Peak, a grind that would turn out to haunt Boom in the coming months. He already had progress from back when he was catastrophic skill, making it to floor 5, so how hard could it be now? He found out after he reached 7, falling back to square 1 and once again making him take a brief hiatus. But this one was a little more worrying, because it lasted over 4 months, with him getting to the popular roguelike game Deep Woken. When the tower officially released to Ito though, he knew he had to get back in the game, and so he did, immediately reaching the 9th floor of the tower. Victory seemed close to fruition, and at one point he reached 10. But unfortunately, as he touched the win pad for the first time, his heart dropped. Boom had forgot to hit the record button, meaning he would have to repeat the entire thing while recording to prove his legitimacy. Overall, this was his worst grind by far, with him amassing over 25 8 fails, 15 9 fails, and a devastating 7 10 fails over the course of his grind. Soon after that, he also beat another horrific, the Tower of Watermelon, in exactly a week. But one horrific remained. On August 6, 2022, he uploaded a video on his progress in Tower of Eternal Void, a high horrific, this time based off consistency rather than hard gameplay. He had gotten to the end of floor 9, meaning that he was already decently close to completing it. Only 5 days after that, he uploaded his final progress video, the dropper of floor 10, about halfway through the floor. It was an impressive feat, and showed he could definitely do this high horrific, and just a couple of days later, Boom finally had that one lucky run. With that, Boom's skill improving arc was basically over, with him beating 2 tier 17s, Elegance and Anata, which mind you were both top 1 tiers respectively, to boost his raw that last bit further. But once again, seemingly out of the blue, Boom once again vanished, and this time, for even longer. For a solid amount of time, Boom was burnout. After the constant pushing of his limits, it finally came to a head and coerced him to take a long break from obbies. But maybe this was a good thing, because when he came back, he was better than ever, reaching victory on EB Nubu, the top 2 obby at the time, just on his birthday. After beating 2 more horrific obbies as a quote-unquote break, he arrived at by far his most daunting challenge yet. The first tier 18 obby, the highest tier these obbies are rated before being humanly impossible. As you could guess, there wasn't any obby beaten that approached its difficulty, so it would be his perfect target. After all the horrifics beaten and extensive progress on a tower that would be tier 18 itself, he felt ready to tackle the obby. Back there, Benjamin. Containing quite literally a jump that requires inhuman precision, and being entirely over the void, he started eyeing up the obbies soon after his hiatus when he noticed a certain player making some progress on it. This was Cyclix, the player we made about halfway through the first section of the obby, the pre-finale. You see, back there Benjamin is mainly divided into two sections, the pre-finale and the finale, with the latter containing the inhumanly precise jump. This jump was a double lodge, requiring near frame perfect timing and a similar amount of precision. Boom decided to beat the entire finale in one run, and when Cyclix noticed this, he might have been a bit jealous, talking not so nicely about him. When Boom saw this, he didn't get demotivated. Actually, quite the opposite. It motivated him, making him want to beat the obby even more to prove Cyclix wrong. So, in the span of about 10 days, he made it to the finale 15 times, with his best run reaching only 5 jumps away from triumph. His consistency was slowing down though, so he took a break to clear his mind. And just like every time before, this worked, with his consistency on the finale increasing tenfold. He continuously poured attempts into the obby, and on a random Tuesday, this happened. Boomsasok had once again made history, with this time being an even more impactful imprint than any he had made before. He was practically a legend within the community already, and this just pushed his name even higher. Next up on his hit list was the Tower of Gunga Genga, a tier 17 that he managed to rebeat for his channel in a stunning 25 minutes. He was on top of the world. Everyone viewed him as the undisputed best player. There wasn't any reason to quit now, right? Well, one tower would give him that reason. This was the Tower of Blind Fate, his first play on Unreal. Like all his past grinds, he made quick progress, managing to get to floor 10 on stream when this unfortunate lag spike occurred. When he did a run from the lag spike, he beat the tower, showing just how unlucky he was. From there, Boom would fail the final floor numerous times, and experienced setbacks like a temporary ban as well as just a buggy computer. He subsequently dropped Blind Fate, and didn't even play obbies for 2 months. The community was left on hold. In the background though, he was still playing, tackling obbies like Stairway to Heaven, a second tier 18 we'll talk more about later. He dropped this 2 separate times just like TOBF. It seemed as the Unreal barrier was just too much for him, and when he tried his hand at the popular Unreal Tower of Spiraling Fates, he dropped that too due to the sheer amount of lag spikes he experienced while playing. No more updates, not even any more community posts, just silence. The era of Boomsasok was over. But then, just as he was preparing to drop obbies for good, he remembered. The Stairway to Heaven. As of now, he had made it about 80% of the way through the obby, but he saw an obby player, Monster as a block, fail the final jump of the obby. This proved that this wouldn't be as daunting as a task as he thought to verify, and it gave him the determination to tackle it once again. Soon enough, he arrived at the grand finale, situated over the void and beating you down when you're most nervous. So close, yet so far from victory, he would repeatedly fail for months, slowly draining his motivation. His runs became less and less frequent, until something happened that triggered his drive again. You see, Boom believed this was easier than his hardest, back there Benjamin, but nobody agreed with him. To prove them wrong, he decided that if he could beat this within a week, it was in fact easier than BTB. Just 2 days later, he made it to the final jump. But he didn't fail it, he landed it, leading him to verifying the entire obby. Boom was back, and finally was given an incentive to play obbies full time again. It's safe to say that in his mind, it was time for something harder than back there Benjamin. The obby, or well, tower he selected to take down this obby was the Tower of Willcore. It contains some of the hardest camera control jumps in any tower, and can take hours for even a terrifying skill player to do a jump alone. In late 2024, Boom decided to take this head on, reaching floor 3 in a couple hours alone. By the way, both floors 9 and 10 are netted besides the infamous final jump, so 8 is almost equivalent to 10 at this point, similar to TOBH. But then, he dealt with floor 4, one of the most brutal for him. He wasn't used to progressing this slow in his grinds, and when he failed the end of the floor, he dropped it like many previous. But that was during his disappearance. With his resurgence and skill boost from Stairway to Heaven, players expected him to beat something even more groundbreaking. When he remembered Willcore, he knew exactly what to do. With the extra skill from beating STH, he broke the floor 4 barrier, eventually getting to 6. With the realization that he was progressing in this notoriously impossible obby, it felt surreal for him. Slowly but surely, his consistency gained, just like past grinds, until he managed his first 8 run, but without recording. everything. He was extremely close to verifying it, but still, his motivation dissipated once again. One thing would reignite it though. Just unlike the case of TOTRP, Willcore was added to the Eternal Abyss, an official Ito extension. He was a little crazy though, and went the extra mile by buffing the tower to make it even more difficult to beat. Unfortunately, school was in the way, and he had to wait until July of 2025 to seriously begin attempting it again. But when he did, it finally clicked. Now, Boom had verified both the hardest tiered obbies and the hardest tower. One list remained: the top jump. To be the ultimate obbyist, he would have to conquer the ultimate destroyer of limits. Really. This consisted of 35 turns of almost perfect precision, but that was the easy part. You see, there was a timer of 4 seconds, and if you get caught on basically any of the turns, you don't make it in time. The only thing proving that this may be possible to Boom was a task, and that still barely cleared the timer. After a bit of grinding, he made it just 0.2 of a second away, but that wasn't close in the grand scheme of things. Hour after hour, he threw attempts, having no idea if what he was doing was even possible, the only thing motivating him being attaining the title of a triple top 1. And suddenly, unbelievably, he made it. By far, his most unreal completion, no pun intended, that allowed him to be the most skilled player to ever touch Roblox, verifying every top 1 on every major list. Well, for a couple of months until Willcore got moved down, bringing us to today, so he has some work to do. But what? Well, that very question will be answered in ample time, but I'm not gonna ruin the surprise. So let's just say there's 3 obbies on the table, each giving Tower Willcore and even the current top 1 a run for their money. But obviously, nothing can be for certain with life circumstances. Let's not get ahead of ourselves though, and instead reflect on what he's done. Boom went from an amateur, exploring what early Roblox had to offer, all the way to the most skilled player the game has ever graced. He still stays humble though, and has told me not to exactly promise anything for the future. Confidently nevertheless, I can most likely say his story doesn't end here, and you can only imagine the beast he'll become in the approaching year. Most of all though, I hope you, the person watching this, was able to gain even the slightest bit of inspiration or motivation from this journey. These obbyists are the same ones who have paved the way for what can be possible both today and in the future. So until next time, goodbye.